Marcus Webb grabbed the 7-year-old boy by the arm and dragged him off the bench. "Where is he? Where's your father?" the child screamed. Daniel Carter came around the corner running, dirt still on his hands, and threw himself between his son and the man who had already destroyed his life once. "Touch my son again," Daniel said, his voice barely above a whisper, "and I will end you right here." Webb smiled. "You're a gardener, Daniel. You ended yourself years ago." But behind the window on the second floor, a billionaire was watching, and she had just seen enough to question everything. Comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far this story has gone. If this story grips you, subscribe and follow, because what happens next will change everything you think you know. The boy was crying again. Not loud, not the kind of crying that gets attention. The kind that hides, pressed into sleeves, swallowed between breaths, buried under the weight of a word no child should ever believe about themselves. "I'm stupid." Ethan Hawthorne was 9 years old. He sat on a stone bench behind his mother's 42-acre estate in Greenwich, Connecticut, with a math workbook open on his lap and a broken pencil beside him. His tears had smeared the ink on the page. He didn't bother wiping them. 20 yards away, Daniel Carter knelt beside a row of hedges with a pair of rusted shears in his hand. He hadn't moved in 3 minutes. He wasn't trimming. He wasn't working. He was listening. And every word that boy whispered hit him like a fist. He knew that voice. Not the boy's voice. The voice underneath it. The one that crawls into a child's chest and tells him he's broken. The one that gets planted by a teacher who gives up too soon, or a system that mistakes silence for stupidity, or a parent too busy to notice the light going out. Daniel knew that voice because he'd spent 2 years pulling it out of his own son's head. He stood up. He wiped his hands on his jeans. He looked at the boy one more time. Then he turned and walked away. That was the rule. Keep your head down. Cut the hedges. Collect the cash. Don't talk to the family. Don't get close. Don't exist. He had a 7-year-old of his own to protect. Daniel Carter had been at the Hawthorne estate for 4 months. The job paid $1,200 a week, cash, no paperwork. That was the deal. That was the only reason he took it. Mrs. Liu, head of household staff, hired him after a 5-minute conversation at a hardware store at 7 in the morning. He was buying fertilizer. She was desperate. "You know plants?" "Enough." "References?" "No." "Criminal record?" "No." She looked at him. Worn boots, clean shirt, rough hands. Then she looked at the small boy beside him, holding a juice box with both hands. "That your son?" "Yes, ma'am. He stays out of the main house. He knows how to be invisible." Mrs. Liu hired him on the spot. No background check, no interview, no questions about why a man with no address was paying cash for fertilizer before sunrise. That was fine with Daniel. Questions were dangerous. Questions had teeth. The cottage sat at the far end of the property. 1 bedroom, a cracked mirror in the bathroom, a stove that only worked on 2 burners. Noah slept on a mattress on the floor. Daniel slept in a chair by the window. Every morning at 5:30 he made oatmeal, packed his son's lunch, walked him to the bus stop at the bottom of the hill. Then he worked. He trimmed. He mowed. He pulled weeds. He cleared drains. He did whatever Mrs. Liu told him to do, and he did it without a single word more than necessary. Nobody at the estate spoke to him. The kitchen staff walked past him like he was furniture. Security gave him a nod that meant nothing. The personal assistant, a sharp woman named Rachel, once told him to move his truck because it was blocking the caterer's van. No please, no thank you, no eye contact. Daniel moved the truck. He didn't care. Invisible was safe. Invisible meant Noah had a roof, a school, a bus stop, a routine, and that was worth more than pride. Pride was a luxury Daniel Carter had sold a long time ago. Emma Hawthorne did not notice gardeners. She ran Hawthorne Education Technologies. $4.7 billion, 12,000 schools, 20 million students, 2 Forbes covers, a congressional testimony, and a keynote speech library full of phrases like, "unlocking every child's potential." Her calendar was booked in 15-minute blocks from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. She had 200 PhDs on payroll. She funded research labs at MIT and Stanford. Her adaptive learning platform could diagnose a child's academic gaps in under 3 minutes. Her own son was failing 4th grade math. "He's shutting down," Rachel told her in the car on the way to the airport. "Not just grades. Emotionally. His teacher called again. He won't raise his hand. He moved to the back row. He told his art teacher he doesn't want to go to college." Emma stared out the window. "Why?" "Because he said he's too dumb." The car went quiet. Emma's phone buzzed 4 times in her lap. She didn't touch it. "He's 9, she said. "I know. I teach 20 million children how to learn." "I know. And my son thinks he's stupid." Rachel said nothing. She turned a page on her tablet and let the silence sit where it belonged. "Get another tutor," Emma said. "He's burned through 3 this year." "Then get a 4th. "Emma, get a 4th. The next afternoon, Daniel heard the boy again. This time, Ethan wasn't whispering. He was crying, sitting on the same stone bench, workbook in his lap, tears running down both cheeks, pencil snapped in half on the ground beside him. Daniel stopped. Every instinct he had said, "Keep walking. Don't look. You're the gardener. You're nobody. One wrong word and you lose the cottage, the paycheck, the bus stop, the only stability your son has had in 2 years." But another voice, deeper, older, the voice that had nothing to do with survival, said something else entirely. "You know what's happening to that boy. You've seen it before. You know exactly how to stop it. And if you walk away now, you're no different from every teacher who gave up on him." Daniel set down the shears. "Hey," he said. Ethan looked up, startled. He wiped his face with his sleeve hard enough to leave a red mark. "I'm fine," the boy said. "I didn't ask." Ethan blinked. No adult had ever said that to him before. Adults always asked if he was fine, and he always lied. And they always believed him, because believing him was easier. Daniel pointed at the workbook. "That math?" "Yeah." "You like it?" "No, I'm bad at it." "Who told you that?" "Everyone. Everyone's wrong." Ethan stared at him. "You don't even know me." "I don't need to. I know math, and I know what it looks like when someone teaches it wrong." Daniel reached into his back pocket and pulled out a small orange, the one he'd packed for his own lunch. He sat down on the ground, not on the bench, on the dirt, cross-legged, 4 feet away from the boy. He didn't crowd him, didn't hover, left space. That mattered. It always mattered. "How many segments in this orange?" Daniel asked, peeling it slowly. Ethan counted. 10. "I give you 3. How many do I have?" 7. "I eat 2. How many total?" 5. "You just did fractions, subtraction, and ratios in 8 seconds, without a pencil, without a workbook, without anyone telling you how." Ethan looked at the orange pieces in Daniel's hand like they were something he'd never seen before. "That's not real math," he said. "Says who?" No answer. "Let me ask you something," Daniel said. When your teacher puts a problem on the board, what happens in your head? Ethan looked at the ground. It goes blank, like a white screen. Everything just disappears. That's not stupidity. That's your brain trying to protect you. The boy looked up. When somebody tells you enough times that you're bad at something, your brain starts shutting down before you even try. It's not a thinking problem, Ethan. It's a fear problem. And fear is fixable. How do you know that? Daniel paused. He looked at the orange in his hand. Because my son had the same thing. He was 5. He stopped talking in class, stopped trying. His teacher wanted to hold him back a year. I almost didn't catch it in time. What did you do? I stopped teaching him the way they wanted me to, and I started teaching him the way his brain actually worked. Ethan's eyes were locked on his. Your son, the little kid at the bus stop? Noah, yeah. Is he dumb too? Daniel's chest went tight. No, and neither are you. That word is a lie. Adults use it when they run out of patience. It says more about them than it does about you. Something moved behind the boy's eyes. Not a smile. Something deeper. A crack in a wall that had taken months to build. What's your name? Ethan asked. Daniel. You're the gardener. That's what it says on the check. How do you know all this? About math and brains and stuff? Daniel looked at the hedges, at the shears on the ground, at the dirt under his fingernails. I read a lot, he said. Tomorrow, don't bring the workbook. Just bring an orange. Ethan was there at 3:15 the next day, orange in hand, no workbook. Daniel let him sit for a few minutes, kept trimming, let the boy own his own decision to come back. That was critical. It had to be the kid's choice. Force kills curiosity. Force is what textbooks do. Then he walked over and sat on the ground. You ever look at a pine cone? I guess. Count the spirals. Daniel handed him one. Ethan turned it in his fingers, counting slowly. His forehead creased. There's 8 going one way and 13 going the other. Now count the petals on that flower. Ethan reached over and pulled a daisy from the edge of the garden bed. He counted twice to be sure. 13. Now this one. 21. 8, 13, 21. Notice anything? Ethan's mouth opened. They're going up. Each one adds the last 2. That's the Fibonacci sequence, and it's everywhere. Pine cones, flowers, seashells, the way hurricanes spin, the way galaxies form. It's the universe showing you its math. Ethan stared at the pine cone in his hand. Why doesn't anyone teach it like this? Because most people don't know, and the ones who do are too busy writing textbooks nobody reads. Ethan laughed, quick, surprised, like he'd forgotten that was something he could still do. It went on for 3 weeks. Same bench, same time, every afternoon. Sometimes oranges, sometimes stones. Sometimes a piece of string and a handful of leaves. Once, Daniel used the shadow of a sundial to teach basic trigonometry. Another time, he had Ethan measure the garden wall with his own footsteps to prove that measurement is just comparison. He never sat in the main house, never used a textbook, never gave a grade, never once told Ethan he was wrong. He asked questions. He waited. He let silence do the heavy lifting. He taught the way he'd always believed teaching should be done, not by pouring information into a child, but by pulling the understanding out. And the boy changed, not overnight, not like magic, but in ways that mattered more than any test score. He started asking questions at dinner. Mom, Did you know sunflowers grow in a Fibonacci spiral? Emma smiled. Mom, why does 0 exist if it means nothing? Emma nodded. Mom, Daniel says prime numbers are like loners. They don't divide evenly with anything. That's what makes them special. Emma put down her fork. Who's Daniel? The gardener. The gardener is teaching you about prime numbers? He's teaching me everything. Emma told herself it didn't matter. Ethan was happier. His teacher emailed to say he'd participated in class for the first time in 6 weeks. Small wins. But it gnawed at her. She'd built a $4.7 billion empire on the science of how children learn. She had algorithms, patents, Nobel-adjacent consultants, the most advanced adaptive platform on the planet. And a man who trimmed her hedges for cash was doing what none of it could do. She started watching from the upstairs window, every afternoon at 3:15. She didn't go outside. She didn't interrupt. She just watched. She saw Daniel sit on the ground. She saw Ethan lean in. She saw her son's hands move, counting, pointing, tracing shapes in the air. She saw something on his face she hadn't seen in 2 years. He wasn't afraid. She couldn't explain it, and Emma Hawthorne hated what she couldn't explain. Thursday, the day everything broke open. Emma came home early. A meeting had been canceled. She walked through the back hallway toward the kitchen and heard a voice behind the closed door of the study. Her ex-husband's old study, the room no one had used in years. She pushed the door open. Daniel Carter stood in front of the whiteboard, his back to the door, a marker in his right hand. The board was covered, edge to edge, in equations, diagrams, spirals, layered notation that built from simple to complex in a pattern Emma recognized immediately. Ethan sat in the leather chair, legs folded beneath him, eyes locked on the board with an expression Emma had never once seen on her son's face. Total focus. The real kind. The kind money cannot buy. Daniel was speaking, calm, precise, almost rhythmic. The Fibonacci sequence isn't just a pattern. It's a language. And once you learn to read it, you start seeing it everywhere. In the way branches split, in the way galaxies spiral, in the spacing between your own knuckles. The universe isn't random, Ethan. It's organized. Math is how it talks to us, and it's been trying to talk to you your whole life. You just didn't have anyone who taught you how to listen. That's the coolest thing anyone's ever said to me, Ethan whispered. Daniel turned to respond and saw Emma in the doorway. The marker slipped from his hand. It hit the floor and rolled under the desk. 3 seconds. Nobody moved. Emma looked at the board. She looked at the man. She looked at her son. Who are you? Daniel picked up the marker, capped it, slowly. I'm the gardener, ma'am. No, you're not. He said nothing. Emma stepped into the room. She walked to the whiteboard. She studied it. The notation, the layered structure, the way each equation scaffolded into the next with a precision she'd only seen in one place before. Research papers. High-level cognitive development papers. The kind of work that takes a decade to produce. She turned around. That's a cognitive scaffolding model. That's not something you learn trimming hedges. That's graduate-level developmental mathematics. That's... She stopped cold. I've seen this framework before. Daniel's jaw tightened. This is the web framework. This is what my company licenses. It's not the web framework. Emma stared at him. It never was. Explain. Now. Daniel looked at Ethan, then at the door, then at the woman standing in front of him, with a billion-dollar question in her eyes. My name is Daniel Carter. 10 years ago, I developed the cognitive learning framework your company's entire platform is built on. Every model, every equation, every adaptive principle your software uses to teach children, I built it. In a lab at Columbia, with a team of 4, funded by an NIH grant that my research partner redirected the day after he filed the patent in his own name. Marcus Webb, Emma said. Marcus Webb. He's been our chief research consultant for 6 years. He holds the patent. He published my work, under his name, with my data, my models, my research. Why didn't you fight it? Daniel's voice dropped. I had a newborn son. My wife was dying. I had no money, no lawyer, no energy. Marcus knew that. He waited until I had nothing left. Then he took everything else. So you disappeared? I let the world believe Marcus Webb was a genius, because the alternative was a court battle I couldn't afford and a custody fight I couldn't survive. Emma looked at the whiteboard, then at Daniel. Mud on his boots, chalk dust on his hands, 10 years of silence written in every line on his face. If what you're telling me is true, my entire company is built on stolen research. I didn't come here for that. Then why are you here? I needed a job. Mrs. Liu hired me. I didn't know this was Hawthorne until I saw the name on the gate. By then Noah was in school. He had a bed. He had a routine. A bus stop he walked to every morning. I couldn't take that from him again. His voice broke on the last word. He didn't try to catch it. I wasn't going to say anything. I was going to trim your hedges and keep my head down and let it go. But then I heard your son on that bench telling himself he was stupid. And I couldn't walk away. I tried. I couldn't. Emma stood still for a long time. Don't leave, she said. Not yet. Daniel met her eyes. I need to make a phone call. Then you and I are going to talk. She walked to the door, stopped. My son hasn't smiled like that in 2 years, she said. I need you to know that. She left. Daniel stood alone in the study. He looked at the whiteboard, his equations, his models, his life's work written from a memory that refused to die. He picked up the marker, and at the bottom of the board, in small, steady letters, he wrote 2 words he hadn't written in 10 years. Carter method. His hand trembled, but the letters were clear. Emma didn't sleep that night. She sat at her desk in the upstairs office with her laptop open and 3 cups of cold coffee lined up beside her like tombstones. The house was silent. Ethan had gone to bed at 9 without being told. Another thing that never happened before Daniel Carter showed up. She typed the name into a search engine. Daniel Carter, Columbia University, Cognitive Development, NIH grant. Nothing. She tried again. Daniel Carter, Learning Framework, Developmental Mathematics, Patent Dispute. Nothing. She leaned back in her chair. Her chest was tight. Either the man was lying, or someone had gone through extraordinary effort to make sure he didn't exist. Emma picked up her phone and called the one person she trusted more than anyone on her payroll. Rachel, I need you to do something for me. Quietly. It's 11:30 at night. I know what time it is. Rachel paused. What do you need? I need you to pull everything we have on Marcus Webb. Not the public file, the real one. Employment history, publication records, patent filings, the original grant documentation from Columbia. All of it. And I need it by tomorrow morning. Why? Because I think we might have a problem. What kind of problem? Emma stared at the whiteboard equation she'd photographed on her phone. The layered scaffolding. The elegant notation. The framework she'd been licensing for 6 years. the foundation her entire platform was built on. The kind that could take down the company. Rachel was silent for 4 seconds. "I'll have it by 7. She had it by 6:15. Rachel walked into Emma's office the next morning, carrying a folder thick enough to prop open a door. She set it on the desk and sat down across from her boss without being invited. "I found something," Rachel said. "Good or bad?" "Depends on what you want to hear." Emma opened the folder. Rachel had organized it in chronological order. Research grants, publication records, patent filings, university employment logs. Standard due diligence. But midway through the stack, Rachel had flagged a page with a red tab. Emma pulled it out. It was a grant application from 14 years ago. National Institutes of Health. Title: Cognitive Scaffolding in Early Mathematical Development. A Neurological Approach. Principal Investigator: Dr. Daniel R. Carter, Department of Cognitive Science, Columbia University. Emma read the name 3 times. "He was real," she said. "He was more than real. He was exceptional. 3 published papers before he turned 30. A full NIH grant at 28. His doctoral advisor called him the most original mind in cognitive education in a generation." That's a direct quote from his recommendation letter. I found it in Columbia's archived faculty records. Then what happened? Rachel handed her another sheet. 2 years after the grant was awarded, Marcus Webb, who was listed as co-investigator, filed a patent on the complete framework. Sole inventor. No mention of Carter anywhere. How is that possible? Because Carter never contested it. I checked court records. No lawsuit, no formal complaint, no grievance filed with the university. He just vanished. Resigned his position. Let the patent go. Dropped off every academic database like he'd never existed. Emma looked at the grant application, at the name, at the signature at the bottom. A signature written by a man who is currently sleeping in a broken cottage at the edge of her property. "His wife," Emma said quietly. "He said his wife was dying." Rachel nodded. "Sarah Carter, diagnosed with pancreatic cancer 6 months after the grant was funded. She died 14 months later. Their son Noah was 11 months old." The room went still. Emma closed the folder. She pressed her palms flat against the desk. So Marcus Webb waited until a man's wife was dying, his son was an infant, and he had no resources to fight back. And then he stole his entire life's work. That's what it looks like. And we've been paying Webb $3 million a year to consult on a framework he didn't create. Rachel didn't answer. She didn't need to. Emma stood up. She walked to the window. She could see Daniel already at work in the garden, pushing a wheelbarrow across the east lawn. His son was sitting on the cottage steps, eating cereal from a plastic bowl before the school bus came. "Emma," Rachel said carefully, "if this gets out, if anyone finds out our core technology is built on stolen intellectual property, we're not talking about a PR issue. We're talking about lawsuits, SEC inquiries, stock collapse. The board will... I know what the board will do. So, what do you want to do?" Emma watched Daniel lift a bag of mulch onto his shoulder. His back was straight. His movements were precise. There was nothing about the way he carried himself that looked like a man who had lost everything. He moved like a man who had simply decided to keep going. "I want to talk to him," Emma said. "Alone." She found him behind the greenhouse at noon. He was repairing a section of irrigation pipe, his hands black with soil, a wrench between his teeth. "Daniel?" He looked up. He took the wrench out of his mouth. He didn't stand. "Mrs. Hawthorne." "Emma?" He paused. Emma. She sat down on an overturned bucket 3 feet away from him. She didn't ask permission. She didn't ease into it. I found the grant application. Columbia. NIH. Your name is on it. The original framework, every model, every equation. It matches what you put on that whiteboard. Daniel kept his eyes on the pipe. His hands didn't stop moving. I know you're telling the truth, she said. What I need to understand is why you never fought back. I told you why. You told me you couldn't afford it. That's not the same as why. Daniel put down the wrench. He wiped his hands on his jeans. He looked at her for the first time. You ever hold a newborn baby in one arm and sign a death certificate with the other? Emma didn't answer. Sarah died on a Tuesday. Noah was 11 months old. He was screaming in the next room because he was hungry, and I couldn't get up. I couldn't move. I sat on the kitchen floor for 6 hours with her death certificate in my hand and a baby crying behind a closed door. He picked the wrench back up, turned it over in his fingers. The next morning, Marcus Webb's lawyer sent me a letter. Cease and desist. If I publicly challenged the patent, they would countersue for breach of confidentiality. They had emails, fabricated, altered, taken out of context, that made it look like I had leaked proprietary research to a competitor. None of it was true, but it didn't matter. I had no money, no lawyer, no wife, and a baby who needed me to be something other than destroyed. So you gave up? No. I chose my son. The words landed hard. Emma felt them in her chest. There's a difference, Daniel said, between giving up and giving everything you have to the one thing that matters. I didn't lose a fight. I walked away from one so I could win another. And the work? Everything you built? It was just work. Noah was my son. Emma looked at him, really looked, past the dirt, past the worn boots, past the 10 years of silence. I have a question, she said, and I need you to answer it honestly. I've been honest with you from the start. What do you want? Right now, from me, from this situation, what do you actually want? Daniel was quiet for a long time. He stared at the irrigation pipe like it held an answer somewhere inside it. I want my son to grow up in a place where nobody calls him stupid. I want him to have a school and a bed and a bus stop that doesn't change every 6 months. I want to wake up in the morning and not be afraid that someone's going to take him from me. He looked at her. I don't want your money. I don't want revenge. I don't want Marcus Webb to suffer. I just want to be left alone. And Ethan? Daniel's face changed. Something softened behind his eyes. Ethan is a brilliant kid. He doesn't know it yet. Nobody's told him. Nobody's shown him. His brain doesn't work the way worksheets want it to, and everyone around him has decided that means something's wrong with him. But there's nothing wrong with him, Emma. He thinks in patterns. He thinks in connections. He thinks the way mathematicians actually think. He just doesn't know that's what he's doing. And you do. I spent 5 years studying exactly this. Kids who fall through the cracks because nobody bothers to look at how they actually learn. They get labeled, slow, behind, difficult, and the labels stick. They stick so hard that by the time someone finally pays attention, the kid has already given up. Like you gave up? I didn't give up. You're trimming hedges for cash. The words came out sharper than Emma intended. She saw Daniel flinch. Just barely. A tightening around the jaw. A flicker in his eyes that disappeared as fast as it came. I'm sorry, she said. That was True. It was true. Daniel set the wrench down. I'm trimming hedges for cash. I'm living in a broken cottage with a 7-year-old who deserves better. I have a PhD from Columbia that I can't put on a resume because the moment I do, Marcus Webb will find me. And when he finds me, he won't just take my job. He'll take my son. How? The same way he took everything else, with lawyers and lies and enough money to make the truth irrelevant. You think a judge is going to give custody to a man with no address, no income, no professional history? Against a man with a patent, a reputation, and a legal team that bills by the minute? You've thought about this. Every single day. Every morning when I walk Noah to that bus stop, I think about it. Every time he asks me why we can't stay somewhere longer than a year, I think about it. Every time he looks at me and says, "Dad, are we going to have to move again?" I think about it. Daniel's voice cracked. He caught it, pressed his lips together, looked at the ground. He's 7, Daniel said quietly. He's already been to 4 schools in 3 states. He doesn't complain. He doesn't cry. He just packs his backpack and says, "Okay, Dad." And that kills me more than anything Marcus Webb ever did, because a 7-year-old should not know how to pack a bag like that. He should not know how to say goodbye to friends like it's normal. He should not be that good at leaving. Emma sat on that bucket and felt something shift inside her. Not sympathy. Sympathy was passive. This was something heavier, something that demanded action. Daniel, listen to me. I believe you. I believe everything you've told me. And I need you to know something. Marcus Webb has a meeting scheduled at my office next Wednesday. He flies in from Boston every quarter to review our platform's research metrics. Daniel went pale. He doesn't know you're here? Emma asked. No. Are you sure? If Marcus Webb knew I was here, I'd already be gone. Then we have a problem. Because if he walks through my front gate and sees your face, this whole thing explodes. Daniel stood up. His hands were shaking. I should leave. Tonight. Before. Sit down. Emma. Sit down, Daniel. He stopped. He looked at her. She hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't moved from the bucket. But there was something in her tone that wasn't a request. He sat. You've been running for 10 years, she said. You ran from Columbia. You ran from the patent. You ran from every city and every job and every school that might have given your son a real home. And every time you ran, Marcus Webb kept winning. I wasn't running from Webb. I was running for Noah. I understand that. But Noah's 7 now, and he's smart. And one day soon, he's going to figure out that his father used to be somebody, and that the reason he's living in a cottage with a broken stove is because someone stole his father's life, and his father never said a word. Daniel's face went white. What do you think that's going to do to him? The silence between them was so heavy, Daniel could feel it pressing against his chest. He's going to ask, Emma said. One day, probably sooner than you think. He's going to look at you and say, Dad, why didn't you fight? And you're going to need an answer that doesn't break his heart. Daniel put his face in his hands. His shoulders didn't shake. His breathing didn't change. But his fingers pressed into his forehead hard enough to leave marks. And when he lifted his head, his eyes were red. I can't lose him, Emma. I can't. He's all I have. You won't lose him. You don't know that. No, I don't. But I know this. I have $4.7 billion, a legal department with 43 attorneys, and every reason in the world to find out whether the technology my company is built on was stolen. That investigation happens whether you cooperate or not. The question is whether you're standing beside me when the truth comes out, or whether you're running again." Daniel looked at her. His eyes searched her face for something. Motive, agenda, the catch. There was always a catch. People with power didn't help people like him. That was a rule he'd learned the hard way. "Why?" he asked. "Why would you do this?" "Because my son looked at a pine cone last night and explained the Fibonacci sequence to me at the dinner table. He was excited. He was happy. He was proud of himself for the first time in his life. And the man who made that happen is sitting in the dirt telling me he wants to disappear." She stood up from the bucket. She looked down at him. "I'm not going to let you disappear, Daniel. I don't care what Marcus Webb threatens. I don't care what it costs. My son was drowning, and you pulled him out with an orange and a pine cone. The least I can do is make sure you don't drown too." Daniel said nothing for a long time. He sat in the dirt behind the greenhouse, with soil on his hands and cracks in his voice, and 10 years of running finally catching up to him. "Wednesday," he said. "Wednesday. What do I do?" "Nothing. You stay out of sight. You keep teaching Ethan. You let me handle Marcus Webb." "And if he finds out?" Emma straightened her jacket. "Then he finds out I already know the truth, and that changes the math entirely." She turned to leave. She took 3 steps, then she stopped. "One more thing." "Yeah?" "Ethan has a recital at school on Friday. Piano. He's terrible at it, and he knows it, and he's terrified. He asked me this morning if you could come." Daniel blinked. "He asked for me?" "He said, and I'm quoting here, 'Daniel always makes me feel like I can do stuff.'" Daniel pressed his lips together hard. He nodded once, quickly. "I'll be there," he said. Emma left. Daniel sat in the dirt for another 20 minutes. He didn't move. He didn't pick up the wrench. He didn't go back to work. He just sat there, holding the space between the life he'd been living and the one that was about to come crashing through the gate. Wednesday was 5 days away, and Marcus Webb was coming. That evening, after the sun dropped behind the tree line and the estate went quiet, Daniel walked Noah home from the garden. The boy had spent the afternoon building towers out of sticks and counting them, the way Daniel had taught him. "Dad?" "Yeah, buddy?" "Are we going to stay here?" Daniel looked at his son. 7 years old, brown hair, serious eyes, a juice box in one hand and a stick in the other. "You like it here?" "Yeah, I like my school. I like the bus. I like Ethan." "You've been talking to Ethan?" "Sometimes, when he comes outside. He showed me a pine cone today and told me about the Fibonacci. Yeah, he said you taught him that. He said you're the smartest person he's ever met." Daniel stopped walking. He knelt down so he was eye level with his son. "Noah, listen to me. No matter what happens, no matter where we go or what changes, I need you to remember something." "What?" "You are not stupid. You have never been stupid, and anyone who ever makes you feel that way is wrong. Do you understand?" Noah looked at his father with the kind of trust that only a 7-year-old can give. Total, unquestioning, absolute. "I know, Dad. You already told me, like 100 times." Daniel pulled his son into a hug so tight the juice box popped. "Sorry," Daniel said. Noah laughed. "It's okay. It was almost empty." They walked back to the cottage. Daniel made dinner on the 2 working burners. Noah fell asleep on the mattress with a pine cone in his hand. Daniel sat in the chair by the window. He didn't sleep. He watched the driveway. He watched the gate. He watched the shadows move across the lawn, like the slow turning of a clock counting down to Wednesday. Marcus Webb was coming. And for the first time in 10 years, Daniel Carter was not going to run. Wednesday came early. Daniel was already awake when the first light hit the cottage window. He hadn't slept more than 2 hours. His eyes were raw. His hands were steady. He'd made that decision sometime around 3 in the morning. Whatever happened today, his hands would not shake. He made oatmeal. He packed Noah's lunch. He walked his son to the bus stop and stood there until the yellow bus disappeared around the bend. Then he walked back up the hill and picked up his shears like it was any other day. But it wasn't any other day. At 9:45, a black sedan pulled through the front gate. Daniel saw it from behind the east hedge. He didn't move. He kept his head down and his hands working, but his eyes tracked the car as it rolled up the gravel drive and stopped in front of the main house. The rear door opened, and Marcus Webb stepped out. Daniel hadn't seen him in 10 years. The man looked the same, tall, lean, silver at the temples, the kind of face that photographs well and lies easily. He wore a charcoal suit, no tie, a leather briefcase in his left hand. He moved like a man who owned whatever room he walked into, even before he entered it. Daniel's grip tightened on the shears until his knuckles went white. Keep cutting. Keep breathing. You're the gardener. That's all you are today. Webb walked up the steps and disappeared into the main house, without looking left or right. He didn't notice Daniel. He never would have. Men like Marcus Webb didn't look at men like Daniel Carter. That was the whole point. Daniel exhaled. His chest unlocked. He went back to trimming. 45 minutes. That's how long Emma said the meeting would last. 45 minutes and he'd be gone. Then they'd figure out the next step. That was the plan. Plans don't survive contact with a 9-year-old boy. At 10:20, the side door of the main house swung open and Ethan came running out. He was supposed to be at school. He was supposed to be in Mrs. Patterson's 4th grade class, doing a reading comprehension worksheet. But the school had called a half-day for a teacher training session, and the bus had dropped him home an hour early. Nobody had told Daniel. Nobody had told Emma. Ethan ran across the lawn toward the garden, his backpack bouncing against his shoulders, a smile on his face so wide it was visible from 50 yards. "Daniel! Daniel! I got a 92 on my math test. I used the patterns like you taught me. Mrs. Patterson said she's never seen me work like that." Daniel's blood went cold. He dropped the shears. "Ethan, stop." But the boy didn't stop. He kept running, waving the test paper over his head like a flag. "She said I showed exceptional reasoning. That's what she said. Exceptional." "Ethan." Daniel's voice was low and hard. "Go inside. Right now." The boy slowed down. His smile faltered. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. I need you to go inside." "But I wanted to show you." "Inside. Now. Please." Ethan's face crumpled. He didn't understand. Daniel had never spoken to him like that. Not once in 3 weeks. The boy took a step back, clutching the test paper against his chest. And that was when the front door of the main house opened again. Marcus Webb walked out onto the steps. He was on his phone, laughing about something. He turned to look at the garden. Just a casual glance, the kind of half-interested sweep a man does when he's bored between calls. His eyes passed over the hedges, over the stone bench, over the boy standing in the middle of the lawn. Then they landed on Daniel Carter. The laughter stopped. Webb lowered the phone. He stared. His mouth opened and then closed, and then opened again. His face went through 5 expressions in 2 seconds. Confusion, Recognition, disbelief, fury, and something else. Something calculating. Something that looked like opportunity. Daniel? Daniel didn't move. Daniel Carter? Ethan looked between them. You know Daniel? Webb came down the steps, slowly, each step deliberate. His eyes never left Daniel's face. I used to, Webb said. A long time ago. He stopped 10 feet away. His phone was still in his hand. His briefcase was inside. He looked Daniel up and down. The worn boots, the dirty jeans, the shears on the ground, the soil under his fingernails. And then Marcus Webb smiled. It was the worst kind of smile. The kind that a man wears when he's just realized his enemy is smaller than he remembered. You're the gardener, Webb said. Daniel said nothing. My God, Daniel Carter is a gardener! Webb laughed, not loud, not cruel enough to sound cruel to anyone listening, just enough for Daniel to hear the blade inside it. I heard you dropped off the map. I didn't think you dropped this far. Ethan, Daniel said quietly, go inside. But now! The boy ran. The screen door slammed behind him. Webb watched him go. Then he turned back to Daniel with something new in his eyes. Something dangerous. That's Emma's son? Don't. Don't what? Don't go where you're going. Webb tilted his head. Where am I going, Daniel? You're the gardener. What could you possibly know about where I'm going? I know you. That's enough. Webb stepped closer. His voice dropped. You know what I think? I think you've been hiding here. I think you've been hiding on this property, right under Emma Hawthorne's nose, doing God knows what. And I think when she finds out who you really are, who you really were, she's going to have a lot of questions. She already knows. Webb's smile disappeared. She knows everything, Daniel said. The grant, the patent, Columbia, all of it. The air between them changed. It went from predatory to electric. Webb's jaw tightened. His hand closed around his phone so hard the case creaked. You're lying. I'm not. If she knew, she would have called me. She did call you. That's why you're here, Marcus. She just didn't tell you why. Webb stood very still. His mind was working behind his eyes. Daniel could see it. The rapid calculation, the repositioning, the search for leverage. This was what Marcus Webb did. He didn't panic. He adapted. He found the angle and he worked it until it became a weapon. It doesn't matter, Webb said finally. It doesn't matter what you told her. I hold the patent. My name is on every publication. Every court in the country would back me. Maybe. Not maybe. Definitely. You had 10 years to challenge it, Daniel. You didn't. That's called abandonment. Any IP lawyer in the country will tell you that. You're probably right. I am right. Then you've got nothing to worry about. Webb stared at him. What are you playing at? I'm not playing at anything. I'm a gardener, remember? For the first time since he'd stepped out of the sedan, Marcus Webb looked uncertain. Not afraid. Uncertain. And for a man like Webb, uncertainty was worse than fear. Fear he could use. Uncertainty meant someone else was holding cards he couldn't see. He took a step back, straightened his jacket, rebuilt his face into something composed. This conversation isn't over, Webb said. I know. I'll be in touch. I'm sure you will. Webb turned and walked back toward the main house. At the top of the steps, he stopped and looked back. How's your son, Daniel? What's his name? Noah? Daniel's entire body went rigid. Every muscle, every tendon. His vision narrowed to a single point, and the point was Marcus Webb's face. Don't say his name. Relax. I'm just asking. Don't say his name again. Webb held up his hands in mock surrender. Take it easy. I'm just an old colleague catching up. He opened the door and went inside. Daniel stood in the garden with his fists balled at his sides and his pulse hammering in his ears. His hands were shaking now. The decision he'd made at 3 a.m, the steady hands, the calm breathing, was gone. Blown apart by 2 syllables. Noah. Webb knew his son's name, which meant he'd already been thinking about this, already running calculations, already looking for pressure points. Daniel picked up the shears. He put them in the tool shed. He locked the door. He walked to the cottage and sat down in the chair by the window, and didn't move until Noah's bus pulled up at 3:15. When his son walked through the door, Daniel hugged him so hard the boy laughed and said, "Dad, you're squishing me." "Good," Daniel said. "Stay squished." Emma called him that night. "He saw you." "I know." "What happened?" Daniel told her. Every word. The smile, the tone, the way Webb had said Noah's name like he was placing a pin on a map. Emma was quiet for a long time. "He's going to come after you," she said. "He already has. He just hasn't picked the weapon yet." "What do you think he'll do?" "Whatever hurts the most. That's his style. He doesn't fight fair. He doesn't fight at all. He finds the thing you can't afford to lose, and he puts a gun to its head. Your custody. Yeah. Can he actually threaten that? He doesn't need to actually do anything. He just needs to create enough noise. A complaint, an allegation, something that gets filed and triggers an investigation. The system doesn't care if it's true. It cares if it exists. And once it exists, I'm fighting a war I can't win. Emma's voice hardened. He wouldn't. You don't know him the way I do. Then tell me. Daniel closed his eyes. Noah was asleep on the mattress 3 feet away, the pine cone still in his hand, breathing the slow, even breaths of a boy who trusted his father to keep the world in one piece. 14 years ago, Marcus and I were partners, friends. I thought he believed in the work the way I did. I thought he cared about the kids. But Marcus never cared about the kids. He cared about the credit. He cared about being the name on the paper. And when the framework was finished, when it was ready to publish, he came to me and said he wanted sole authorship. And you said no. I said no. I said it was our work, but the core methodology was mine, and I wasn't going to pretend otherwise. That was on a Friday. By Monday, he'd filed the patent. By Wednesday, he'd changed the passwords on the lab servers. By Friday, he'd reported to the department head that I had mishandled grant funds, and I was suspended pending investigation. Was the investigation legitimate? The allegations were completely fabricated. But it didn't matter. By the time the university cleared me 4 months later, Marcus had already published. He'd already secured licensing deals. He'd already built a reputation on my work. And I had a wife with stage 4 cancer and a baby who needed me more than any courtroom did. So you walked away. I walked toward my son, away from everything else. Emma was silent. He'll do the same thing again, Daniel said. Different weapon, same strategy. He'll find a way to make me look dangerous, unstable, unfit. He'll frame it as concern for the children. He's very good at that, framing destruction as concern. I won't let him. You might not have a choice. I always have a choice, Daniel. I have 43 lawyers and $4.7 billion. That's a lot of choices. Money didn't help me last time. You didn't have me last time. Daniel went quiet. He looked at Noah sleeping, at the pine cone in his hand, at the cracked ceiling of a cottage that was the closest thing to home his son had known in 2 years. "Why are you doing this?" he asked. The real reason. Not the Fibonacci story. Not the gratitude. Why are you putting your company on the line for a man you've known for 4 months? Emma took a long breath. "Because my son was broken, Daniel. Not his brain, not his potential. His belief in himself. That was shattered. And I have more money and more power and more influence that I know what to do with, and none of it could fix the one thing that mattered." She paused. "You fixed it with an orange, in the dirt, on a Tuesday, while I was at a board meeting deciding the future of 20 million students." "Emma, I'm not done. You asked me why. Here's why. Because I have spent 6 years building my company on a framework I was told belonged to Marcus Webb. I stood on stages and praised that man's genius. I wrote him checks. I gave him access to my data, my schools, my platform. And now I find out the real genius was living in my servant's cottage, trimming my hedges, and teaching my son with pine cones, because the system I helped build was too broken to notice him." Her voice cracked. She caught it. "That's on me. I didn't know, but now I do, and I am not the kind of woman who finds out the truth and looks the other way." Daniel pressed his phone against his forehead. His eyes were closed. The ceiling fan in the cottage clicked with every rotation, a broken blade hitting the housing over and over, like a heartbeat with a stutter. "If he goes after my son..." "He won't get near your son." "You can't promise that." "Watch me." The call came 3 days later. Not from Marcus Webb. From his lawyer, a firm called Kessler Brandt and Associates, the kind of firm that billed $800 an hour and didn't lose. The letter arrived by courier at 7 in the morning. It was addressed to Emma Hawthorne, CEO, Hawthorne Education Technologies. Rachel intercepted it, read it twice, and walked it into Emma's office without knocking. "You need to read this right now." Emma took the letter. She read it once. Her face didn't change. She read it again. Then she set it on the desk and placed both hands flat beside it. "He's not going after Daniel," she said. "No. He's going after me." The letter was a formal notice of intent to sue Hawthorne Education Technologies for defamation, breach of contract, and tortious interference. It alleged that Emma Hawthorne had engaged in a deliberate campaign to undermine the professional reputation of Dr. Marcus Webb, based on the unsubstantiated claims of a disgruntled former colleague. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was paragraph 9. Rachel had highlighted it in yellow. It stated that Marcus Webb had obtained credible evidence that Daniel Carter, an unvetted individual currently residing on the Hawthorne estate, has been engaging in unsupervised and unauthorized contact with a minor child, Ethan Hawthorne, without parental consent or appropriate background clearance. Emma read paragraph 9 a third time. "He's framing it as a child safety issue," Rachel said. "I see that. If this gets to the press before we respond, it won't matter what the facts are. The headline writes itself. Billionaire lets unvetted man teach her son. It'll be on every outlet in the country by noon. I know. The stock will tank. I know. The board will demand his removal. And yours." Emma looked up. "Mine? You let an unauthorized person access your child. In the current climate, that's not just a corporate liability. It's a custody issue. Richard's lawyers will be on the phone within the hour." The room went cold. Emma stood up. She walked to the window. She could see Daniel in the garden. Same shears, same hedges, same quiet, invisible man doing the same invisible work. "He knew," Emma said. "Webb knew exactly where to hit." "He always does." "Get me Thomas Reed." "Your lead counsel?" "My lead counsel, my head of PR, my investigator, and clear my schedule for the rest of the week." "All of it?" "All of it." Emma turned from the window. Her eyes were dry. Her voice was flat. Her hands weren't shaking anymore. "Marcus Webb just declared war on my company, my son, and a man who has done nothing but help a child believe in himself. If he wants a fight, I'll give him one. But he's not going to like how it ends." Rachel stood up. She paused at the door. "What about Daniel?" "Don't tell him. Not yet. I need 24 hours before he finds out." "He'll want to run." "I know. That's why I need 24 hours. I need everything in place before he panics. Because if Daniel Carter disappears again, Marcus Webb wins. And I am done letting that man win." Rachel left. Emma sat back down at her desk. She opened the folder Rachel had compiled. The grant records, the patent filings, the publication history, the altered emails, the trail of stolen work that led from a lab at Columbia to the foundation of her $4.7 billion company. She picked up her phone and made a call. "Thomas, it's Emma. I need a full forensic audit of every document Marcus Webb has ever submitted to this company. Every patent, every publication, every research file. I want original metadata, timestamps, IP logs, and chain of custody on all of it." "That's going to take weeks." "You have 72 hours. "Emma, that's not—" 72 hours, Thomas. And one more thing. "What?" "I need a family law attorney. The best one in Connecticut. Someone who specializes in protecting parental rights against institutional pressure." "For you?" "For the gardener." Thomas was quiet for 3 seconds. "I'll have names by tonight," he said. Emma hung up. She looked out the window one more time. Daniel was kneeling by the hedge, trimming. His back was straight. His movements were steady. He didn't know that 3 miles away, a law firm was loading a weapon designed to destroy his life for the second time. He didn't know that the man who stole his work had now come for his son. He didn't know that the quiet life he'd built out of silence and sacrifice was about to be ripped open in front of the entire country. He was just cutting hedges. And Emma Hawthorne made herself a promise she had never made before. Not to her board, not to her shareholders, not to her investors, not to anyone. She was going to protect that man, whatever it cost. Because she had finally met someone who had given up everything for his child. And she'd be damned if she watched the world punish him for it one more time. Daniel found out on his own. Not because Emma told him. Not because Rachel slipped. Because Noah came home from school on Friday afternoon, climbed off the bus, walked into the cottage and said, "Dad, there was a man outside my school today taking pictures." Daniel's whole body locked. He was standing at the stove, stirring pasta. The spoon stopped moving. His knuckles went white around the handle. "What man?" "I don't know. He had a camera. He was standing by the parking lot. My teacher told us to go inside fast." "What did he look like?" "I don't know, Dad. Just a man, in a car." Daniel turned off the stove. He knelt in front of his son and held both of his arms gently but firmly. "Noah, I need you to think. Did the man talk to you? Did he come close? Did he say anything?" "No, he was just standing there. Mrs. Delaney said it was probably a parent." "Was it a parent?" "I don't know." Daniel pulled Noah against his chest and held him. The boy squirmed after a few seconds, the way 7-year-olds do when they don't understand why a hug is lasting so long. "Dad, you're being weird." "I know. I'm sorry. Go eat your pasta." Noah sat at the table. Daniel walked into the bathroom, closed the door, and called Emma. She picked up on the first ring. There was a man outside Noah's school today, taking pictures. Silence. Emma. I know. You know? I was going to tell you tonight. We intercepted a call from Webb's legal team to a private investigator yesterday. They're building a file. A file on what? On you. Your living situation, your employment, Noah's school, your daily routine. They're documenting everything. Daniel gripped the edge of the sink. You said you'd tell me. You said I needed time to get the pieces in place. If I told you yesterday, you would have run. I should run. I should take Noah and go where? Another town? Another state? Another cottage with a broken stove? How long before Webb finds you again? A month? A year? He knows your name now, Daniel. He knows your son's school. Running doesn't work anymore. Daniel stared at his own face in the cracked mirror. He barely recognized it. The man staring back was someone he thought he'd buried. The man who used to fight, who used to believe the truth was enough, who used to think the system would protect him if he just played by the rules. That man had been wrong. What's the plan? Daniel asked. We go on offense. How? Press conference, Monday morning, at my corporate headquarters. That's 3 days from now. I know. Webb's lawyer filed that letter 4 days ago. If the press gets the child safety allegation before we respond, they won't. My PR team has been in contact with every major outlet. We've requested a 48-hour embargo in exchange for an exclusive. They agreed. An exclusive on what? On the truth, the full story, the stolen research, the fabricated patent, the cover-up, all of it. Documented, verified, and ready to present. Daniel's hand was shaking. He steadied it against the sink. And me? What happens to me at this press conference? That's your choice. You can be there or you can stay out of it. But I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear it clearly. Say it. Thomas Reed, my lead counsel, finished the forensic audit this morning. He pulled metadata from every patent filing Webb submitted, every publication, every research document. And? The original digital files were created on a Columbia University server under your login credentials. Your name is embedded in the metadata of every single document. Webb filed patents using files you created, Daniel. He didn't even bother to strip the authorship tags. He just changed the cover page and submitted. Daniel closed his eyes. His forehead touched the mirror. The glass was cold. That's it, he said. That's the proof. That's the proof. Time-stamped, authenticated, admissible in any court in the country. Webb's entire portfolio is built on files that your account created, on a server you had access to, months before he ever filed a single patent. He didn't know the metadata was there. No, he was sloppy. He was arrogant. He assumed you'd never come back. Daniel stood there with his eyes closed and his head against the glass, and 10 years of silence pressing against his chest like a wave that had finally reached the shore. There's more, Emma said. What? Thomas also found the original emails, the ones Webb used to accuse you of mishandling grant funds at Columbia. He had them analyzed by a digital forensics expert. And? They were altered, headers modified, timestamps changed. The forensics report shows that the emails Webb submitted to Columbia's ethics board were edited 3 days before he filed the complaint. The original versions, the real ones, are still on the Columbia server backup. Thomas subpoenaed them this morning. The university kept the backups? Federal grant. They're required to retain all communications for 15 years. Nobody at Columbia thought to check because nobody ever challenged the complaint. Daniel opened his eyes. He forged evidence to get me fired, he said. And nobody checked. Nobody checked because you didn't fight. The truth of it hit him like a hammer. 10 years. 10 years of running, hiding, shrinking, disappearing. And the proof of his innocence had been sitting on a backup server the entire time. Waiting. Just waiting for someone to look. Daniel, are you there? Yeah. I need to ask you something, and I need an honest answer. Ask. At the press conference on Monday, when I present all of this to the public, do you want to be standing next to me? Daniel looked through the bathroom door. Noah was at the kitchen table eating pasta, swinging his feet, humming a song Daniel didn't recognize. What happens to Noah if I do this? I've already hired the best family law attorney in Connecticut. Her name is Grace Chen. She's handled custody cases against corporate legal teams twice this size. She's reviewed your file. She says Webb has no standing for a custody challenge. None. You have no criminal record, no history of neglect, no substance issues. You're a single father with a stable residence and a child enrolled in school with good attendance and no disciplinary record. Webb will fabricate something. He already tried. The child safety allegation in the legal letter. Grace reviewed it. It's baseless. There's no complaint filed with any agency. No police report. No school report. It's a threat, Daniel. That's all it is. A threat designed to make you run. Threats become real when they hit the news. Which is why we go first, Monday morning, before Webb can plant anything, before his lawyers can leak anything. We tell the story on our terms, with documented evidence, in front of cameras, and we make it impossible for anyone to spin it. Daniel was quiet for a long time. My son is going to hear about this, he said. He's 7. He's going to find out that his father was accused of something terrible, that people said things about me that aren't true. Or he's going to find out that his father stood up and told the truth, and that the truth won. You don't know it'll win. I know the evidence. I know the metadata. I know the forged emails. I know what the forensics report says. And I know that Marcus Webb is a man who built his entire career on a lie. Lies don't survive sunlight, Daniel. They never do. Daniel wiped his face with his hand. He looked at Noah one more time. I'll be there, he said. Are you sure? No, but my son deserves a father who stops running. Saturday and Sunday passed in a blur of preparation. Emma's team worked around the clock. Thomas Reed assembled the evidence package, metadata reports, forensic analyses, original grant documents, the Columbia server backups, and a timeline that showed, step by step, how Marcus Webb had stolen Daniel Carter's work and buried the man who created it. Rachel coordinated with the PR team. They prepared a press briefing, a media kit, and a list of pre-approved questions. They booked a conference room at Hawthorne's headquarters in Stamford that seated 200. Grace Chen met with Daniel on Saturday afternoon in the cottage. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and a voice that sounded like it had never lost an argument. Mr. Carter, I need to be direct with you. Please. Marcus Webb's lawyers will almost certainly file for an emergency custody review once the press conference goes public. They'll argue that your involvement in a high-profile legal dispute creates an unstable environment for your son. Can they win? No, but they can create chaos. Temporary hearings, home visits, interviews with Noah's school. It'll be invasive and it'll be stressful. For Noah. For both of you. But here's what they can't do. They can't take your son. You have a clean record. You have stable housing. You have documentation of continuous care for 7 years. I've handled cases where parents had far less going for them and walked out with full custody. You're going to be fine. You're sure? I'm sure. But I need you to promise me something. What? No matter what Webb says, no matter what his lawyers file, No matter what shows up in the press, you do not run. You do not take Noah and disappear in the middle of the night. If you do that, you give them everything they need to argue you're a flight risk. And that's the one thing that could actually hurt you. Daniel nodded. Say it out loud, Grace said. I won't run. Good. She shook his hand and left. Daniel sat in the chair by the window. Noah was outside, building a tower of sticks in the yard, counting them as he stacked. 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8. Fibonacci. The boy had memorized the sequence without anyone asking him to. Daniel watched his son build and count and build and count, and he made a decision he'd been putting off for 10 years. He was going to fight. Monday morning arrived cold and gray. Daniel put on the only dress shirt he owned, a white button-down he bought at a thrift store 2 years ago and never worn. It was slightly too big in the shoulders. He tucked it into his cleanest jeans. He didn't own a suit. Mrs. Liu agreed to watch Noah for the day. She didn't ask questions. She just looked at Daniel standing in the cottage doorway in his white shirt and said, He'll be fine. Go do what you need to do. The drive to Stamford took 40 minutes. Rachel picked him up at the cottage in a black SUV. Daniel sat in the back seat and didn't speak for the entire ride. When they arrived at Hawthorne headquarters, the parking lot was already full. News vans lined the street. Reporters stood in clusters near the entrance with cameras and microphones. Daniel stared through the tinted window. That's a lot of cameras, he said. You don't have to speak, Rachel said. Emma will handle the presentation. You just need to be there. I want to speak. Rachel turned around. What? I want to speak. I want to tell them myself. Daniel, the PR team prepared a very specific, I've been silent for 10 years. I let someone else tell my story. Or erase it. For a decade. I'm done being silent. Rachel studied his face. Whatever she saw there made her nod once and pick up her phone. Emma, change of plan. He wants to talk. A pause. Yeah, I know. He's sure. Rachel looked at Daniel. She says you get 5 minutes. That's all I need. They walked in through a service entrance. The hallway was long and quiet. At the end of it, Emma was waiting in a gray suit with her arms crossed. She looked at Daniel, and he looked at her, and neither of them smiled, because this wasn't a moment for smiling. Ready? She asked. No. Good. That means you're thinking clearly. They walked toward the conference room. Through the double doors, Daniel could see rows of chairs filled with reporters. Cameras mounted on tripods. Bright lights. Microphones arranged on a long table at the front. Emma stopped before they entered. She turned to him. Whatever happens in there, I want you to know something. Ethan asked me this morning if you were going to be okay. He said, and this is a direct quote, Mom, you have to help him. He helped me when nobody else did. Daniel's throat closed. He looked at the ceiling. He breathed. Your son said almost the same thing, Emma added. Mrs. Liu told me Noah said, My dad is the bravest person in the world. He said it while eating cereal, like it was a fact, like it was the most obvious thing he'd ever said. Daniel pressed his hand flat against the wall. He stood like that for 3 seconds. Then he straightened his collar, squared his shoulders, and said, Let's go. They walked in together. The room erupted. Cameras flashed. Voices overlapped. Reporters shouted questions before anyone reached the table. Emma raised one hand. The room went quiet. Thank you for coming. I'm going to make a statement, and then we'll take questions. But first, there's someone I want you to meet. She turned to Daniel. This is Daniel Carter. For the past 4 months, he has worked as a groundskeeper on my personal estate. Before that, he spent 10 years in hiding. And before that, he was a cognitive scientist at Columbia University who developed the learning framework that my company and Marcus Webb built $1 billion business on. The room didn't make a sound. I'm going to present documented evidence that Dr. Marcus Webb stole Daniel Carter's research, filed fraudulent patents, forged emails to have him removed from Columbia, and has spent the last decade profiting from another man's work while that man raised his son alone with nothing. Emma opened a folder. She presented the metadata, the forensic analysis, the Columbia server backups, the altered emails, the timeline. She walked through each piece of evidence with the precision of someone who had spent her entire career building systems to organize information. It took 22 minutes. When she finished, she turned to Daniel. "Daniel, you said you wanted to speak." He stood up. He walked to the microphone. 200 faces stared at him. 50 cameras tracked his movement. The lights were blinding. He gripped the edges of the podium with both hands. "I'm not going to talk about patents," he said. "I'm not going to talk about metadata or legal filings or research grants. Emma has covered all of that better than I could." He paused. "I want to talk about my son." The room was absolutely still. Noah is 7 years old. He's been to 4 schools in 3 states. He packs his own backpack every time we move. He doesn't cry about it. He doesn't complain. He just says, "Okay, Dad," and puts his shoes on. And that's the thing that hurts the most. Not the stolen work, not the lost career, not the decade of silence. The thing that breaks me is that my son learned how to leave before he learned how to stay. His voice cracked. He didn't stop. "I became a gardener because it was the only job I could get without putting my real name on a piece of paper. I lived in cottages and basements and one time the back of my truck for 3 weeks because I was afraid that if Marcus Webb found me, he'd take the one thing I had left. I gave up my career, my name, my work, everything, because a 7-year-old boy needed his father more than the world needed another research paper." He looked directly into the nearest camera. "And I'd do it again, tomorrow, without hesitation. Because that's what fathers do. We don't run from our children. We run for them." He stepped back from the podium. He didn't wait for questions. He walked to the side of the room and stood against the wall with his hands in his pockets and his eyes on the floor. The room was silent for 4 full seconds. Then every hand went up at once. The first question came from a reporter in the front row. "Mr. Carter, Marcus Webb's legal team released a statement this morning alleging that you have a history of unstable behavior and that your contact with Mrs. Hawthorne's son was unauthorized and inappropriate. How do you respond?" Daniel looked up. "I taught a 9-year-old boy how to count the spirals on a pine cone. If that's inappropriate, then every teacher in America should be investigated." "Mrs. Hawthorne, were you aware that Mr. Carter was interacting with your son?" "I became aware of it and chose to allow it to continue because my son showed more academic and emotional progress in 3 weeks with Daniel Carter than in 3 years of private tutoring. I stand by that decision." "What about the child safety concerns raised by Dr. Webb?" Emma leaned into the microphone. "There are no child safety concerns. There is no complaint, no report, no investigation. What there is a man who stole another man's life's work and is now trying to destroy him a second time by weaponizing the most sacred accusation you can make against a father. And I think every parent in this room understands exactly how despicable that is." Silence. Any further questions about Dr. Webb's allegations can be directed to our legal counsel. But I want to be clear about one thing. Emma stood up from her chair. Daniel Carter is not a threat to children. Daniel Carter is the reason my child is not broken. And if the world can't tell the difference between a predator and a father who got on his knees in the dirt to teach a boy he wasn't stupid, then we have a much bigger problem than a patent dispute. The press conference lasted another 40 minutes. By the end, 3 networks had already cut to live coverage. The metadata evidence was circulating on every major news site. Webb's legal team issued a statement calling the allegations unfounded and retaliatory. It was buried within the hour. By 6 p.m., the story had been viewed 14 million times. By 9 p.m., Columbia University announced it was reopening the internal investigation into the original grant complaint against Daniel Carter. By midnight, Marcus Webb's Wikipedia page had been edited 11 times. And in a small cottage at the edge of a 42-acre estate in Greenwich, Connecticut, Daniel Carter sat in a chair by the window with his sleeping son on his lap and the television muted in the corner, showing his own face on every channel. He didn't watch it. He watched Noah breathe. That was enough. The calls started at 6 in the morning. Daniel's phone, a prepaid device he'd bought at a gas station 2 years ago, rang 11 times before he answered. He didn't recognize the numbers. He didn't answer any of them. He let them go to a voicemail box that had never been set up. Noah ate his oatmeal and stared at his father. "Dad, your phone keeps making noise." "I know, buddy." "Are you going to answer it?" "Not right now." "Is it about the thing on TV?" Daniel looked at his son. "You saw that?" "Mrs. Liu's TV was on when I woke up. I saw your face. You were standing at a table with microphones." Noah took another bite of oatmeal. "You looked scared." "I was." "But you did it anyway?" "Yeah." Noah nodded, slow and serious, the way only a 7-year-old can nod when he's processing something bigger than his vocabulary. "That's what brave means, right? Being scared and doing it anyway?" Daniel's throat tightened. "Where'd you learn that?" "You told me, like 100 times." Daniel almost smiled. Almost. But his phone rang again, and the moment passed. He walked Noah to the bus stop. The boy climbed on the bus, turned around in his seat, pressed his face against the window, and waved. Daniel waved back and stood there until the bus was gone. Then he stood there for another 2 minutes, because letting go of that image, his son's face against the glass, safe, waving, ordinary, felt like something he might need to hold on to. When he got back to the cottage, Emma was waiting on his porch. "We need to talk," she said. "I figured." Webb's legal team filed a motion at 7 this morning, emergency custody review, just like Grace predicted. Daniel sat down on the step. He put his head in his hands. "They're fast," he said. "They're desperate. The press conference changed everything. His firm lost 2 clients overnight. Columbia reopened the investigation. His publisher pulled the 2nd edition of his book pending review. He's cornered, Daniel. And cornered men do stupid things. Stupid things like going after my son. Grace is already on it. She filed a counter motion an hour ago. She's requesting an immediate dismissal on the grounds that the petition is retaliatory and filed in bad faith. The judge assigned to the case is Margaret Hollowell. Is that good? Grace says Hollowell has zero tolerance for weaponized custody filings. She's thrown out 3 cases like this in the last 2 years. Grace thinks we'll have a ruling by Wednesday. Daniel lifted his head. Wednesday? That's 2 days of Noah going to school, while some investigator might show up at his classroom. Grace filed a protective order this morning. No contact with Noah by any representative of Webb's legal team, without 48 hours written notice, and supervised access approved by the court. Hollowell signed it within the hour. She signed it already? She read the press conference transcript. She read the forensic report. And she read Webb's filing. Emma sat down next to Daniel on the step. The filing was sloppy, Daniel. His lawyers rushed it. There are procedural errors on the first 3 pages. Grace said it reads like a panic move, not a legal strategy. It doesn't matter how sloppy it is. It exists. It's in the system. My name is attached to a custody challenge, and it will be dismissed, publicly, on the record, which means Marcus Webb will have a court ruling stating that his custody petition was frivolous and retaliatory. That's not a wound, Daniel. That's a weapon. For us. Daniel stared at the gravel driveway. A bird was hopping between the stones, pecking at nothing. I've spent 10 years being afraid, he said. And I'm still afraid. That's the part that gets me. I did the press conference. I told the truth. The evidence is out there. And I'm still sitting on this step at 6:30 in the morning, feeling like a man who's about to lose everything. That feeling doesn't go away because you did the right thing. It goes away when the right thing finishes working. And it's working, Daniel. I need you to trust that. He looked at her. I trust you. I just don't trust the system. You don't have to. You just have to trust Grace Chen. And from what I've seen, that woman could argue the sun into rising in the west. Daniel exhaled. Something in his chest loosened. Just barely. Just enough to breathe. There's one more thing, Emma said. What? Ethan wants to see you. Daniel hadn't seen Ethan since the day Webb showed up at the estate. 5 days. He'd stayed away from the main house on purpose, kept his distance, didn't want to give anyone ammunition. The boy had been told that Daniel was busy. That was the explanation Rachel gave. Busy. But Ethan Hawthorne was 9 years old, and he wasn't stupid. He knew something was wrong. He knew it the way kids always know. Not from information, but from the change in the air. The way adults stopped talking when he entered a room. The way his mother came home early 2 days in a row. The way Daniel's cottage light stayed on all night. When Daniel walked into the kitchen of the main house that afternoon, Ethan was sitting at the table with a pine cone in one hand and a piece of paper in the other. The boy looked up. His eyes were red. He'd been crying, but he was done now. Done in that way kids get when they've cried everything out, and all that's left is a kind of exhausted clarity. Are you leaving? Ethan asked. No. Promise? I promise. Because a man on TV said you did something bad, and my mom said it wasn't true, and I told her I already knew it wasn't true, because you're the best person I've ever met, and bad people don't teach kids about Fibonacci. Daniel sat down across from him. What's that? He pointed at the paper. Ethan slid it across the table. It was a math test. At the top, in red ink, the teacher had written, 98%. Excellent work, Ethan. Your improvement is remarkable. Below the grade, Ethan had written something in pencil, small letters, careful handwriting. Thank you, Mr. Carter. Daniel picked up the paper. He read those 4 words 3 times. His vision blurred on the 3rd reading, and he had to put the paper down. I want to show you something, Ethan said. He held up the pine cone. I counted the spirals again, but this time I counted both directions, and I figured something out. What? The spirals going left are 8. The spirals going right are 13. 8 plus 13 is 21. But 8 and 13 and 21 are all Fibonacci numbers. So it's not just the spirals that follow the pattern. The sum follows it too. The whole thing is Fibonacci all the way down. Daniel stared at the boy. Nobody told me that, Ethan said. I figured it out myself. Is that right? That's right. So I'm not stupid? You were never stupid, Ethan. Not for 1 second of your life. The boy smiled, and it wasn't small or nervous or surprised like the first time. It was full, wide open. The kind of smile that comes from a place that's been locked for a long time and finally has a key. My mom said you might come work at her company, Ethan said. Is that true? Daniel looked toward the doorway. Emma was standing there, leaning against the frame, arms crossed. She'd been listening. We haven't talked about that yet, Daniel said. We should, Emma said. The custody ruling came on Wednesday, exactly as Grace predicted. Judge Margaret Hollowell dismissed Webb's petition in a 9-page opinion that used the words frivolous, retaliatory, and an abuse of judicial process in the first paragraph alone. She ordered Webb's legal team to pay Daniel's attorney fees in full and referred the filing to the state bar for review. Grace called Daniel from the courthouse steps. It's over, she said. The petition is dead. Hollowell didn't just dismiss it, she buried it. No appeals court in the country will touch this. Noah's safe? Noah is safe. There is no active custody proceeding against you anywhere in the United States. You are his father. Full stop. Daniel sat down on the cottage floor. He put the phone on speaker and let it rest on his knee. He could hear Grace talking about next steps and legal protections and filing a civil suit against Webb for malicious prosecution. But the words washed over him like water. Noah was safe. That was the only sentence that mattered. When Noah came home from school that afternoon, Daniel was waiting at the bus stop. Not leaning against the fence like usual, standing in the middle of the sidewalk with his hands in his pockets and his eyes clear. Noah stepped off the bus and looked at his father. You're smiling, the boy said. Yeah. You never smile at the bus stop. Today's different. Why? Because we're staying, Noah. Right here. This school, this bus stop, this house. We're not moving. Noah stood very still. His backpack hung off one shoulder. His lunchbox dangled from his left hand. He looked at his father the way a child looks at a parent when they've heard a promise they're afraid to believe. For real? For real. Like forever? Like forever. Noah dropped his lunchbox. He ran at his father and hit him at full speed, arms wrapping around Daniel's waist, face buried in his shirt. He didn't say anything. He just held on. Daniel held him back. He closed his eyes and let the weight of his son press against him. And for the first time in 10 years, the weight didn't feel like something he was carrying. It felt like something holding him up. Dad? Yeah? Can I have the same bus stop tomorrow? Daniel laughed. It came out broken and wet and strange, because he couldn't remember the last time he'd laughed like that. Same bus stop tomorrow, he said. And the day after that. And the day after that. The weeks that followed moved fast. Columbia University completed its reopened investigation and formally cleared Daniel Carter of all allegations related to the original grant complaint. The university issued a public statement acknowledging that the complaint had been based on fabricated evidence and that Dr. Carter's separation from the institution was unjust. They offered him a formal reinstatement of his academic credentials, including his full title and publication rights. Daniel read the email from the provost's office 3 times. Then he closed his laptop and went outside to trim the hedges. Old habits. Marcus Webb was charged with patent fraud, wire fraud, and filing false statements with a federal agency. The FBI had gotten involved after the Columbia investigation uncovered the altered grant documents. Webb's legal team negotiated for 2 weeks before their client surrendered himself at a federal courthouse in Boston on a Tuesday morning. Daniel didn't watch the coverage. Rachel told him about it. She said Webb walked into the courthouse without his usual composure. No charcoal suit, no smile, no briefcase. He looked, Rachel said, like a man who had finally run out of other people's work to hide behind. The patent was invalidated. Every one of them. A federal judge ruled that the original intellectual property belonged to Daniel Carter and ordered a full transfer of rights, including all licensing revenue collected over the past decade. Thomas Reed called Daniel with the number. The back payment on licensing fees alone is just over $47 million. Daniel was standing in the garden. He had the phone in one hand and a pair of shears in the other. Say that again. $47 million. That's what Webb's licensing agreements generated using your framework. Under the court order, it all transfers to you. Minus legal fees and taxes, you're looking at roughly $29 million after everything's settled. Daniel looked at the shears in his hand. He looked at the hedges. He looked at the cottage where his son was doing homework on a mattress on the floor. "Mr. Carter, are you there?" "I'm here." "There's also the matter of future licensing. Emma wants to renegotiate the framework agreement directly with you. She's offering a position, Director of Educational Research at Hawthorne Technologies. Full salary, benefits, equity package. She wants to rename the framework in all company materials." "Rename it to what?" "The Carter Method." Daniel put down the shears. He sat on the garden wall. He looked at the sky. "I need to think about it," he said. "Take all the time you need." He took 2 days. On the second night, he was sitting in the cottage with Noah after dinner. The boy was drawing at the kitchen table. Spirals, pine cones, number sequences scrawled in crayon across a sheet of construction paper. "Dad?" "Yeah?" "At school today, Mrs. Delaney asked what my dad does for work, and I said you're a gardener." "That's right. But you're not really a gardener, are you?" Daniel looked at his son. 7 years old, brown hair that needed cutting, a crayon in each hand, serious eyes that were starting to see things they hadn't seen before. "I was a scientist," Daniel said, "a long time ago, before you were born." "Why'd you stop?" "Because someone took my work and said it was his, and I didn't fight back because I was taking care of you." Noah processed this. He put one crayon down, then the other. "So you gave up being a scientist for me?" "I didn't give it up. I chose you instead. There's a difference." "What's the difference?" "Giving up means you lost something. Choosing means you picked something better." Noah thought about this for a long time. "Am I better than being a scientist?" "You're better than everything." The boy smiled. Then he picked up his crayons and went back to drawing spirals. "Dad?" "Yeah?" "When Mrs. Delaney asks, tomorrow, can I say you're a scientist?" Daniel looked at the drawing, the spirals, the numbers, the patterns his son had learned not from a textbook, but from a man who refused to let the world decide what he was worth. "Yeah, Noah, you can say that." Daniel accepted the position on a Friday morning. He drove to Hawthorne headquarters in the same white thrift store shirt he'd worn to the press conference. Rachel met him at the entrance and walked him to Emma's office on the 7th floor. The nameplate on the door had already been changed. It read, "Dr. Daniel Carter, Director of Educational Research." He stopped in front of it. "When did you make this?" he asked. "The day after the press conference," Emma said from inside the office. "I had a feeling." Daniel walked in. The office had a window that looked out over the campus, a whiteboard on the wall, and on the desk, next to a computer and a stack of files, sat a single pine cone and an orange. "Ethan's idea," Emma said. "He insisted." Daniel picked up the pine cone. He turned it in his fingers, counted the spirals the way he taught a boy to do on a stone bench in a garden that felt like a lifetime ago. I have a condition, Daniel said. Name it. Noah and Ethan. I want them in the same school. Not private tutors, not adaptive platforms. A real classroom with a real teacher who understands that not every kid learns the same way. Done. And I want to build a program, not just for Hawthorne, for every school that uses your platform. A module based on the Carter method that teaches the way I taught Ethan. Through curiosity, through nature, through questions instead of answers. That's not a condition. That's why I hired you. Daniel nodded. He set the pine cone down. He looked at the whiteboard. It was blank, clean, waiting. He picked up a marker, and he started writing. 6 months later, on a Saturday afternoon in October, the estate was full of noise. Not the quiet, sterile kind of noise that had lived there before. The click of keyboards, the hum of security systems, the distant engine of a car pulling in or out of a driveway that never seemed to lead anywhere warm. This was different. This was laughter. Noah and Ethan were in the garden. They built a maze out of sticks and stones, and they were timing each other running through it. Noah had a stopwatch. Ethan had a notebook where he was recording the times and calculating averages. They argued about whether it was fair that Noah's legs were shorter, and whether they should adjust the data for height differential. They were 7 and 9 years old, and they were arguing about data normalization, and neither of them knew that's what it was called. Daniel stood near the greenhouse and watched them. His hands were clean. His shirt was new. He still wore boots, old habit, but they weren't caked in mud anymore. Emma came out the side door with 2 cups of coffee. She handed him one without asking if he wanted it. Ethan's school sent his progress report yesterday, she said. And top 5% of his class in math. His teacher wrote a note. She said he teaches the other kids when they get stuck. Uses pine cones and oranges. Apparently, he started a whole thing. Daniel sipped his coffee. He doesn't need me anymore. He'll always need you, just differently now. They watched the boys run the maze again. Noah tripped on a stone and fell face first into the grass. Ethan pulled him up. They both laughed so hard they couldn't stand straight. Daniel. Yeah? Thank you. He looked at her. For what? For not walking past that bench, that first day, when you heard him crying. You could have kept going. You should have kept going. Every instinct you had told you to keep going. And you didn't. I couldn't. I know. That's what makes you different from everyone else who had the chance and kept walking. Daniel didn't answer. He watched his son get up from the grass, brush off his knees, and line up at the start of the maze again, ready to run it one more time. Not because he had to, because he wanted to. That evening, after the boys had exhausted themselves and the sun had dropped behind the tree line, Daniel walked Noah back to the cottage. It wasn't the same cottage. Emma had it renovated 2 months ago. New stove, new mattress, a real bed for Noah in a real bedroom with a window that faced the garden. Noah climbed into bed. Daniel sat on the edge. Dad? Yeah, buddy? I like this bus stop. Me too. I'm not going to have to pack my backpack again, right? No, you're not. Good, because Ethan and I are building a bigger maze tomorrow, and I need to be here for it. Daniel pulled the blanket up to his son's chin. He leaned down and kissed his forehead. You'll be here for it, he said. I promise. Noah closed his eyes. Within 2 minutes, his breathing was slow and even. A pine cone sat on his nightstand next to a crayon drawing of 2 spirals, one big, one small, labeled in careful 7-year-old handwriting, Me and Dad. Daniel stood in the doorway and watched his son sleep. The house was quiet. The estate was dark. The hedges he used to trim every morning stood in perfect rows along the garden wall, still and patient under the moonlight. He closed the door gently. He walked to the kitchen. He sat at the table, and for the first time in 10 years, Daniel Carter did not sit in a chair by the window, watching the driveway for headlights, listening for engines, waiting for the sound of someone coming to take everything away. He sat at the table like a man who lived there, because he did. Because a gardener who knelt in the dirt to teach a child he wasn't broken had proven something the whole world needed to hear. That a man's worth is not measured by his title, his salary, or the name on his door. It is measured by what he does when a child is crying and no one else stops. It is measured by what he sacrifices when no one is watching. It is measured by the choice to stand up after the world has spent a decade pushing him down. Daniel Carter was never just a gardener. He was a father, and that was the most powerful thing a man could be.